Without trying to sound defensive, it almost feels like I need to make the case again for what we're trying to do in this worship series and why it might be important. Because bringing the church back to the table feels a little bit like swimming upstream, kind of going against the grain. So here's my case. When it comes to the core practices of the church, worship, witness, faith formation, community building, discernment, accountability, confession and restoration, rituals of belonging, all of them are scalable down to the size of a table where small numbers of people are gathered. Not only that, they are often done better at table scale. They are often more deeply relational, transformational, authentic, and inclusive. Now, in no way am I saying that larger, highly structured forms of church can't also engage in those practices with integrity, because they do. Nor am I saying that table-sized groups always do them well, because they don't. What I'm trying to push against, gently, is the popular notion that people practice their faith mostly within the four walls of a church building and the services and programs that happen there. And I'm saying that as someone who devoted over 4 decades of my professional life helping larger congregation programs and systems run well. And I don't regret that for a moment. We need larger congregations like ours doing what they do well with their greater visibility, more extensive resources, and collaborative energy. And we need people like you here this morning being part of this, investing consistently in this collaborative work that we do, showing up with what you have to offer. Without organized churches like ours, some of the vibrant community agencies like OCP would have a much harder time making a go of it. But if any of us think we can check off the religion box by putting our rear ends in a church pew, or dollars in an offering plate, or hours in a church kitchen, then I think we've fallen for a great American myth that being Christian means going to church. And that outside those few hours on a weekend, how we order the rest of our lives is private and personal and disconnected from faith and church. No. The life of faith, the life of following Jesus, is a whole life endeavor. It's calling to us 24/7. So most of that has to happen in real, honest, authentic, life-giving, everyday human relationships. That's what bringing the church back to the table is all about. It's about reminding us of the totality of a life of faith and of the need to do it in companionship with others. So all that is to set the stage for looking at another core practice of the church, witnessing to the gospel. We church people are familiar with the language of witness, and we tend to place it in one of 2 categories. We're talking either about the public witness of the church to society and the world, or the personal sharing of our faith with someone. Almost any act of witness that comes to our mind could be put in one of those 2 categories. The public witness of the church includes things like church planting, evangelism, medical missions, disaster relief, food distribution, Christian education, social service, peace building, public protest, political advocacy, and more. And personal faith sharing can also encompass a range of activity. Talking to a neighbor about your faith, long conversations with a friend at a coffee shop, showing kindness to a stranger, writing a memoir, and more. All these acts of witness, if they are done with compassion and kindness and humility, are important ways to bear witness to the gospel of Jesus. But today I'm suggesting we tend to overlook a whole other category of Christian witness: the compelling witness of a living community of Christ. That is, people in relationship with each other, just living like a community of disciples of Jesus as they navigate everyday challenges of life together. I'm talking about not being afraid to put our shared lives on display and make them accessible, to be more hospitable, to extend the table, to risk opening our ordinary lives to outsiders and inviting them in to see what living Christianly looks like in the everyday. But the thing is, inviting people into the ordinary moments of our lives doesn't come natural. Hospitality today, I think, is actually countercultural. Our hyper-individualistic culture shapes us to keep our doors and our lives locked up, private. So we live in communities that are often segmented and isolated from each other. And all of us have mess at home and in our lives, literally and figuratively. Before we invite someone in, we need to cover up or clean up. I'm referring to ordinary spaces, not our Sunday best that we put out for a nice party or event. I'm talking about the gift of hospitality, not the gift of entertaining. Those are two different things. Hospitality is openness. It's vulnerability. It's accessibility. It's authenticity. And it is risk-prone. The perceived risk of having people see us when we're not at our best is one reason why having people over on a whim, or, God forbid, dropping by to visit unannounced, seems like such an antiquated and quaint practice. That kind of thing, believe it or not, used to happen regularly. It did in the home I grew up in, and it still does in some cultures. But our privatized and risk-averse and protective posture that we take toward our neighbors has resulted in lives that are far more lonely and isolated and fragmented than they once were, I believe. And it also means that if someone is living in our neighborhood, maybe next door, and struggling with life and longing for community and wishing there were people with whom they could ask the deeper questions of life and suffering and God, about the only doorway available to them is pretty intimidating. They have to walk in the entrance of a strange and imposing religious building and blend into a crowd of people they don't know, whose symbols and rituals they don't understand. It takes a rare kind of courage to walk into any social situation where it's clear to you and everyone else that you're an outsider. So in today's polarized and fragmented social environment where the institutional church like ours is less known and less trusted, how do people ever begin a faith journey when the Spirit starts nudging them toward it? Unless people of faith that they already know and trust show genuine hospitality to them, open their lives as they are to be shared on equal footing with them, where gifts are freely given and freely received, and where, as the relationship develops and mutual trust grows, it becomes safe and authentic and comfortable to discuss not only weather and sports, but the deeper things of life, the struggles of parenting, the struggles of marriage, of facing financial insecurity, or of the core values that drive our decision-making, or how to perceive God's presence in the face of suffering. Church at the table is not focused on filling seats or meeting budgets or growing our programs. There's a place for that. But church at the table is slow church. It's about taking all the time we need to build authentic relationships and create safe and welcoming spaces for wanderers and explorers. Even though it's nothing we can rush, it's still something we can be intentional about. We can start by asking ourselves and asking the groups we associate with how open we are or not with our neighbors, with the people who are adjacent to us. Are we ready to let our lives be seen, to let our lives be accessed, to let our time and spaces be shared? And if we're ready, how might we start? The backyard barbecue, neighborhood block party, a community garden, Sunday afternoon motorcycle ride, bike ride, quilting party, community sing. The possibilities are endless. Maybe you could join efforts with some other church families who live near you. Maybe a small group or a grouping of groups or a faith formation class could plan something that is purposely outward facing and invitational to your neighbors. It might end up just being a one-off thing that seems like it had little impact, and that's fine, because months or years later, one of your neighbors might hit a crisis point, and it occurs to them to turn towards someone that they had a safe conversation with at your event. I think this is what Jeremiah had in mind when he wrote those words of admonition to the exiles living in Babylon. He encouraged them to invest in their neighborhoods, even as outsiders. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. And then said, seek the shalom of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its shalom you will find your shalom. I also think this lines up with Jesus' intent when he sent his disciples out in pairs in Luke 10, as we heard. He did not give them a program or any pre-packaged gospel witness. He told them to go and find people of peace. People who would welcome them into their houses where they could share life together. And only then, when the time was right and the relationship was strong enough to sustain it, they would start preaching and healing and proclaiming that God's kingdom is near. The invitation here is to let the Spirit move among us. Let our lives be a witness, and let our lives be witnessed. And let us walk as children of the light. I invite you to turn to Voices Together 777, to the song titled simply Seeds. Be ready to sing this song. It was written by Seth Christman and Greg Yoder of the Walking Roots Band. To sing, use our hands, use our feet, to show your love and your peace and cover us with love. But before we sing, join with me in the confession that's in your bulletin or on the screens. In a world where darkness overwhelms, let us walk as children of light. In a world of misinformation and misdirection, let us follow Jesus. In a world where loneliness is epidemic, let us show up for each other. In a world where division threatens all our well-being, let us seek the shalom of every person, community, city, and nation. In God, there is no darkness at all. The night and the day are both alike. The Lamb is the light of the city of God. Shine in our hearts, Lord Jesus.